Hi everyone, Dave here at East Rosebud Fly and Tackle in Billings, Montana. We're going to continue our series with tying different flies for you. Today we're going to tie an old favorite of mine, the Beadhead Prince Nymph. It's not a real complicated tie. The Beadhead Prince Nymph, in my opinion, represents a Stonefly nymph. If you think about the Stonefly life cycle, our larger stoneflies, like the golden stone and the California stonefly, actually have a 3-year life cycle. So if you think about that, in the beginning of spring, you have nymphs from the eggs laid the previous spring, and they can be about an inch long. Then you have the nymphs that have been in the river for 2 years. They can approach 2 inches long. And then you have this year's nymphs, which are ready to hatch. The mature nymphs, and they can be with the California stone 2.5 inch long. My point is that there are always stonefly nymphs available to the trout year round, and they come in all sizes from small, 3/4 to an inch long, all the way up to 2.5 inches long. So a fly like a Prince Nymph is a good bet to use any time of the year. What I'm using is a 2x long nymph hook. This is a 1/8 inch tungsten bead, gold. You can certainly use a brass bead. The brass bead costs about 1/3 as much as a tungsten. Tungsten does sink about twice as fast. And you can always supplement the weight like I'm going to do here. I'm using .020 lead wire. Simply trap the end of it on the far side of the hook and wrap it just like you would thread. I'm going to wrap, let's see, eight wraps here, but you can wrap as little or as much as you want. Go ahead and smooth the ends down. Use your fingernails, push them together. Get those ends trapped and smooth. Get my hands out of the way here, like so. I like to bring my bead out to the lead, the center of the lead in the bead, and then push the whole works forward nice and firmly. Now I'm using 8/0 Vivus thread, black. We're going to start right behind our lead wraps, and we're going to build a gradual dam for 2 reasons. One, it will make the transition of our body materials look nicer, plus it'll also keep those lead wraps forced up against the bead so they don't move. So a nice gradual transition. Smooth thread body all the way to the end of the hook shank, which is right above the barb. Now for the tail, we're going to use a pair of brown goose biots. They come stripped like this, or you can buy the feather and strip them yourself. I would caution you, if you're going to sit down and tie a dozen of these, to don't pull 24 biots off at once, because these biots do change in width and in length as you go down the feather. So I always like to pull the biots off that are next to each other so that they're similar in size. So what we're going to do is we're going to cross these biots so that the tips flare outward. First biot I pick up, the tip's flaring away from me, and the second biot, the tip is flaring towards me. And then we simply, if I can get this picked up, simply cross them back to back like this, and then you can slide them to get equal length. Make sure that they're parallel along the entire length before you tie them in. Alright, we want this about 1/2 hook shank long. The trick to getting a good tail, biot tail, you split the biots over the hook shank. You hold that division right above the hook and the biot slightly tilted your way. Bring one soft thread wrap over the top, pull it down, a couple of tight thread wraps in front of it, and with practice you can get biots right on top, right where you want them, and equally divided. Now to keep our abdomen smooth, we're going to go ahead and wrap these biots up close to our thread dam, clip them off before we get there, and make a nice smooth transition. Now we're going to come up here about halfway on the lead base itself. The product that you don't see used much anymore, but it's still a valuable product, is plain old oval French tinsel. This is not wire. This is metallic wrapped over a strong cotton cord, and it has a really nice effect. For this, we're going to use a size small. Comes on a spool, which is handy. And we're going to tie this on the far side of the hook, catch it with a couple of soft wraps, and then bring it down. While we're bringing it down, we want to continue to taper this abdomen right down to the base of our tails. Now, I like a really plump Prince Nymph. It's been said that peacock curl is trout candy, that any fly tied with peacock curl is a good fish catcher, and I've certainly found that to be true. You can certainly use strung peacock curl that comes in a bag, but usually that herl is pretty thin, pretty flimsy. There's not a lot of herl on the stem, so at this I like to use an eyed stick, and I will take at least a half a dozen herls here from up underneath the eye where the flues are the thickest. I can get them cut off. Okay. Then spend a minute here just getting the tips fairly well even. We want these herls to be approximately the same length because we're going to use almost all of it and we don't want to run out before we get to the end. Cut off about 1 inch of the tips, they're just too fragile. Come back up here at the base of our lead wraps. Again, the whole point is to try to keep our abdomen nice, smoothly tapered. Wrap over the herls to the back and then bring our thread up behind the bead. We're going to wrap this peacock forward. Keep your fingers close to the hook as you wrap. That will keep your herl from flying off in all directions like a herd of cats. And you want to wrap this tight right up against the back of the bead. 3 wraps to secure it. I have found that 3 wraps will secure just about anything. Now we're going to bring our oval tinsel forward. We don't want to overdo it. We do want the peacock herl to show through. So we're only going to use a few widely spaced wraps like this. Again, right to the back of the bead. I like to tie my materials off on the side of the fly, particularly if I know I'm going to have something on top, which we will. We'll have some soft hackle and a pair of white biot, so we want to try to keep the top of that as smooth as we can. A couple more wraps. Alright, for our soft hackle, I'm just using a brown hen neck. You can tie this in a couple of different ways. I'm going to go ahead and tie it in my traditional way by the tip. We want to make sure that our hackles are about 1.5 hook gap in length. So I'm going to divide a tip tie-in, and then I'm going to take just a couple of hackles off of the side that will face the hook first. So we're going to tie this division point in directly behind the bead. Bring your thread over, and then we're going to make 2 additional wraps backwards. That secures the tip. It also gives us a place to wrap the hackle. Your hackle pliers. As we wrap this, we want to try to fold those feathers back to get us a nice smooth wrap. So we've got 1 wrap and we have a 2nd wrap. We don't have to go crazy here. Now where our thread is hanging, which is a couple of wraps back, we make 1 wrap to secure the herl or the feather, 2nd wrap through it, a 3rd wrap right behind the bead eye. A typical soft hackle sequence. And we're going to get these hackles, fold them back a little bit, and then wrap our thread backwards in a couple of touching turns to force that hackle back. Now for the wings, or whatever that's supposed to represent, maybe a wing case, we're going to use a couple of white goose biots. Again, I like to take them off right next to each other to assure I have equal sizes, lengths, widths. I like to pull them off with tweezers, don't want to cut them off. If you pull them off, you'll get extra length, which can be important if you're doing a biot wrapped abdomen. Now this time we're going to overlap them like scissor blades, like so. We want these to be hook length long. Want this to come right to the back of the abdomen. And we want to have these goose biots crossed right where we're tying them in. These goose biots are slick, so you need to firmly hold them down with your thumb and put several tight thread wraps over to secure them. Okay, I have a pair of curved iris scissors that are my favorite for cutting materials off really close behind a bead. Cut those off as close as we can. Couple more wraps to secure them tightly. Whip finish. And because these biots are slick and hard to tie down, I always like to add just a touch of head cement on them to secure everybody. There you go, Beadhead Prince Nymph. If you have not fished this fly, you should certainly give it a try. I think you'll be very happy with the results. As always, thanks for joining. If you have any questions or any comments at all, don't hesitate to contact us. We'll see you next time.